So without further ado, I'll introduce our keynote speaker, Robson Kanhalelo. Robson is a postgraduate student at the University of Namibia, currently working towards a master's in educational technology. Today, he'll be telling us about exploring the adoption and role of open source software in schools. Over to you, Robson.
Hello. Hello, everybody. How is it going? Okay. I was thinking before we start with, writing code and delve into all the complex stuff, we should look at one of the aspects that are being really overlooked at as many conferences I know as I have attended, which is education. I'm an educator myself. I'm a full-time teacher. I teach computer science and math. So to every conference that I go to, I try to, integrate whatever skills and that I learned from that conference into the classroom. So I'm super excited to be here at the 13th edition of PyCon ZA. Let me go on a journey with you. So today, I want to talk about exploring and adopting the adoption of open source software in schools. But before we do that, I want, just to talk about myself a little bit. That's me, but that's not my name. My name is Robson Kanhalelo, and I am a postgraduate student at the University of Namibia. And I'm studying towards a Master of Educational Technology, and I am also a software developer. I have to put the "ish" there because I don't do software development full-time anymore, because I'm mostly committed to teaching. So every time I have to, develop something, then we have to do it together with my students. So I'm a teacher full-time, and I teach at a local school called HTS. So with that, I'm from Namibia. So let's, what is it? So I am involved in many hackathons in my country. Like we had, also at NUST, Terra Data Science School. I'm also, individually, if I'm not doing hackathons, then I'm busy uplifting my students to win some medals and competitions. So I'm both individually and also as a teacher trying to, do whatever in my capacity to build the community that I'm involved in my country. So let's get started, I guess. Okay, what is open source software? Anyway, I'm sure, like everybody in the room, we have, what open source software means actually. But in a conventional classroom, if you have to tell the learners what open source software is, of course you have to, according to Raymond, according to what this is how we define open source software. So you can tell the learners, for instance, you can be able to inspect the software and modify it and you can able to enhance it as well. But one of the most interesting, and if you want them to be engaging and participative, you have to tell them that it's for free. So if you tell them that it's for free, then they'll be like, okay, well, what can you tell me which software I can use for free? And where can I get it? So you will, see them actually trying to engage and ask questions and, wanting to know more about software that you're talking about. So what is the issue, basically, with open source software? The issue is that in many schools in Africa, specifically, there is a lack of integrating this type of technologies into the classroom. So we have many, many technologies. And now the conversation between education and technology is like no more about education by technology itself. But then if people have to talk about technology, they have to talk about the inclusive and quality of education, the accessibility, and also, the efficiency. But then we cannot have quality education. We cannot have an effective education without, looking at many aspects of technology itself. If we limit the students into only having specific type of technology in the classroom, then we are not providing a quality and inclusive education. So, but we have platforms like open source foundations and open source software, which we can be able to utilize and integrate into the classroom and make use of that so that we can build an equitable and quality education for the learners. So these modern technologies are widely available, but they are not adopted. So the issue is with what? Why they are not adopted? So there are issues like infrastructure, high software costs, and also some outdated educational resources, which are the reason why so many students do not have exposure to these digital tools, which are needed for the fourth industrial revolution. So if we are to build a fourth industrial revolution for which learners have to utilize all the digital tools available at their expense and use these tools to build the future, then we have to look in many aspects of technology. We have to think about the challenges like the infrastructure issues, like the software cost issues, and then how do we actually solve these challenges to build schools that are inclusive, that are providing quality education, not only in Namibia, but in South Africa, in Tanzania, anywhere actually where we are having initiatives that are providing a platform for learners to also showcase their skills and, uplift communities. So with these challenges that we have in our schools, so what can we do basically now? So we have to look at open source software. And when we refer to open source software, we are not only overlooking at things like Python, or we are looking at things like, Scratch, that is actually now newly introduced in schools. So we have to look at so many domains where we can, use the technology, or gather the technology, learn about it, and then we integrate it into the classroom for the learners to be able to, learn about this. So open source can be able to help us bridge this gap of infrastructure issues, software cost issues, and also access. So, and why it matters, basically, why does it matter? Because, of course, with open source software, we have affordability. If you tell learners, now open source software is actually free, yes, then we can afford it as a school. Schools operate on a budget, for instance, state-owned schools, which are actually a lot in many countries. And then if the budget doesn't include actually the integration of technology, for instance, open source software, then we can actually set that on our side, and then we can say, no, instead of actually using Windows, we can use Linux in our school computers. And then you can provide learners with a platform where they can also be able to do many skills by only using Linux. So with that case, we can tackle the affordability issues. It's not that schools do not want to adopt Linux because they can afford Windows. Of course, they can't afford Windows. And 2-3 years ahead, they will be struggling with software licensing issues, but they are not aware of Linux. So it also allows them to be flexible and have options to choose what they want to do, not only limited to they normally go to Microsoft Word, Office, and Excel, but they can explore so many options with open source software like Linux. They can use LibreOffice. They can use, OpenOffice. They can use all other softwares like Chimp instead of, downloading things like Photoshop, which are licensed. So with this, school can utilize open source software because it will help them to, limit their budget on buying licensed software. And then they can also be able to not purchase proprietary software at all. So Another important issue with open source is that it's widely accessible and is available for free in the public domain. So it's just basically the awareness that is not there. So if we want, learners to adopt this type of technology, we have to build awareness in our school communities, in our tech communities, and in our groups, or basically as a parent at home. You may be, looking at some of the technologies that your kids have to use, and then you have to limit them to, no, just use Microsoft Word, just use Microsoft Excel. But if you, diversify the type of technology they have to use, then you are not just limiting them to only one type of technology, but you're actually letting them, enhance their skills by learning other technologies as well. So why do we need software in education, open source? The reason is being, we want to encourage innovation. Innovation cannot only happen when you are looking at one aspect, because there are many ways to get innovative. And if you are looking at only one type of technology to be innovative, then you won't be really that innovative. So we also want adaptability, because if we have to build an inclusive and quality education, it has to be adaptable. And then with open source software, these learners can be able to collaborate with each other on many platforms, like open source platforms that we know that actually they can be able to collaborate with their teachers, with their mentors, and be innovative and build skills that are needed for the fourth industrial revolution. What is the role of open source software in our schools? Basically, we want to empower the teachers, because the number one reason why we have to include software which is open in our schools is because teachers should have options to choose which technology they have to teach the kids. So if you, for instance, as a teacher, I have to teach at a school that only has technology which is Microsoft-based software, but then if you look at the administration itself and ask, why do we only have to go for this specific software? Then they will be like, no, because it's one that we think is on the market, or it's what we think is best for the learners. But they are overlooking other aspects, like why don't we go for, why don't we install Linux operating system on our computers? And then they'll be like, what is Linux? Because they are not aware of Linux. It's because when they actually, during their educational journey, they never used some of this open source software. And the issue with open source software in specifically African schools is awareness. People are really, really just not aware about it. And then with this is what we want to do. We want to, teachers should know that there are options that they can use as teachers, not only getting confined to certain type of technology, so that they can be able to utilize this in the classroom, so they can build a quality and inclusive education. So we also want to integrate this in our curriculum development. So we are at the stage and era where we are building education for the future. And education for the future needs to look at many aspects to integrate different type of technologies that we can use, so that we can build fourth industrial revolution skills and everything that is needed, for the fourth industrial revolution. But throughout the curriculum reform and development, we need to look at what we have to integrate into this new curriculum of learning, because now learners are no more spending many of times in books, but maybe on TikTok or on social media. So with this now, as a curriculum developer, you have to look at aspects where you have to, have content that is accessible to these learners, and then it's free, and also is resourceful. So when we are developing our curriculum, we have to now look at also open source software, so that we can integrate it into our classrooms and our curriculum development planning, so that we can utilize it also in the classroom to help the learners build the skills. So we can also promote collaboration and problem solving because with open source software, there are so many platforms that we can now utilize to be able to collaborate and solve problems. Like, how many learners maybe are having GitHub accounts? Not many. How many learners are on TikTok? A lot. But why don't they have GitHub accounts? Or why don't they actually go to this platform? Because of the awareness issue. Because, many of the teachers don't talk about these things in the classroom. So this is where open source can help out if we actually carefully and properly integrate it into the classroom. So, but what are now the challenges? Why are schools not adopting open source software, basically? So one of the challenges is policy and awareness. We have policies even on the business side of things that are actually, restricting the use of certain technologies. But then our old policies of, allowing this type of digital technologies like open source to be in the classroom, these are the things that we have to look at. Now, the policymaker should reform their policies so that we can be able to include the use of other type of technologies in the classroom like open source software so that we can, also plan our budget nicely, and we can limit ourselves. We cannot limit ourselves to only using other software. So awareness on the other side is because many people are not aware of open source software. So how do we actually, look at the awareness issue, especially in the educational environment? Awareness is the one also limiting people from adopting open source software because we don't know about it. So as a community, as community builders, as Python as developers, we should try at least to, spread the message and let the community be aware of, the softwares that we use and they are free and that they can be used in schools. So that is the reason why they are not adopting them because of policy and because they are not aware about it. So with that, then we can start with things like teacher training programs. Then we should try to train and support teachers within our initiative that we conduct. Like we have PyCons everywhere. We have PyCon ZA, we have PyCon Namibia as well. So let the teachers know about this type of software so that they can adopt it in the classroom. So we can do that through workshops and also teacher training programs that we can use to, allow teachers to know about this type of technology so it can be easy for adoption. And then the issue of infrastructure, that one, of course, there can be collaboration between private and, public sector where, the infrastructure issue is not really a thing because, government can collaborate with the teachers to, bring in resources that can help the learners to learn. But the issue is actually utilizing those resources. Like, okay, if, for instance, we give certain type of computers to a certain school, what software are they going to use and integrate onto those computers? Of course, they are just going to go for Windows first. Not just because it's properly marketed, but because that is what comes to their mind first. So the infrastructure issue is not really an issue. Like teachers need to be aware first, and they need to be trained with this open source software so they can integrate it properly into their classrooms and also their educational settings. Okay, so what are some of the local use cases and case studies? So Scratch, MIT Scratch. The one with the mouse and, MIT Scratch is widely adopted in Namibia and also in many schools that I actually have been into. So the reason is because Scratch has been open sourced and is free and schools have an option now to use Scratch as an open source software to integrate it into their classroom and use it for free to teach learners how to code. So this is a screenshot of the Namibian syllabus for grade 8, where they, the general objectives are for us to understand they need to use logic and sequential order to produce product. So what are the objectives? The learner should be able to apply programming principles using Scratch. Looking at how Scratch is being integrated into the syllabus of like the grade 8 learners is something that is really, uplift. Like this is a open source software, but how about other schools that don't or are not aware about Scratch? What are they using basically? So if we look at, the awareness issue and now like try to tell other schools, no, you can use Scratch to, start coding and other things, then you can also be able to integrate it into your classroom. So the Paynam Scholars Society is a society which is having a community of learners from different schools. So we try to bring them together as a community under PyCon Namibia, and then within our PyCon Namibia community, we teach them. We have workshops at our conferences where we have to let them aware of the Python programming language, and then build those skills not only in the classroom but also outside of the classroom. So we also initially started the Namibia Annual High School Programming Competition. And the reason is we want to uplift programming skills within the schools. Because if we are to inspire a next generation of programmers and coders, then we have to get out those skills within the learners themselves. So some of these initiatives, of course, using Python, which is an open source software, the foundations of adopting open source within our Namibian educational ecosystem. And then we are looking at, like Paynam Scholars and the Namibia High School Programming Competition as, pivots to actually, initiate this adoption of open source software within our education settings. So we had workshops like that, which are, initiated by PyCon Namibia. We try to go to schools and help these learners learn Python. Thanks to BBC Microbit, it helps us with their micro devices that we used at our previous PyCon in March this year. And then we, try to bring the learners together, and then we teach them how to program. So there are also global use cases and the case studies that we can see as success stories for open source software, like Moodle. I think you have came along the Moodle logo, especially during COVID. Moodle is an open source software, and it has been open sourced, and now educators are using it for free so that they can reach a multitude of learners to help them learn online. And it has been really quite resourceful during COVID when we had, we have to attend classes online. And we also have the big blue button, which is an alternative for other paid software like Zoom. Open source software that we are widely using and adopting, in our educational settings to help, learn and build inclusive and quality education. And then Python, of course, a language that is bringing communities together and people together from different backgrounds. And we are adopting it also in our educational settings to help, bridge the gap of learning to code and learning to program. So what are the recommendations that I can give? Basically, we need to start building our communities. We need to, have initiatives that are helping learners come together and let them be aware of open source software, and also try to, inspire them to be programmers and teach them about different alternatives of technology that they can use. So we can also, have training workshops in our PyCon community and PyCon groups. We are not only coming to, talk about how to code and how to do that and what, but we can also be inclusive enough to bring along people that are transferring these type of skills into the classroom, because learners are the next generation of coders. But then if we leave them out, then we are probably not gonna have a generation of coders. So if we can have some mini workshops and to include the teachers as well, to train them on how to use the skills that we have learned as programmers, then we can also help spread the knowledge not only in our own, tech community, but also in the classroom. So with that, I thank you so much. That was my take for today, and you can follow me on X as Kanhalelo. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you for that, Robson. That was very, very good. We have some time for questions, so I'm going to open the floor. And I think for audibility purposes, if you could raise your hand and I'll bring you a microphone so that everyone can hear it. Okay.
Hi, I just wanted to check. I've seen quite a few things online these days about Python interpreters on mobile devices, so either your phone or tablets. I was wondering, I understand one of the biggest kind of problems of entry for a lot of areas is the fact that people don't necessarily have computers or things to be able to code on. So do you think this would be kind of a viable option? I can't really imagine a school telling all their learners to sit there, take out your phone so we can code Python. But it's a nice introduction. It's also not something that's commonly known. What are your thoughts?
I'm aware of that because after my undergraduate, when I went to my first school I went to, it still had years. In the first lesson that they were having, there were learners having their phones, and she was using like Python, in an interpreter online. I think she got it from Play Store, and I was like, how do you code on a phone? So yeah, that one is actually also widely accessible, but is not widely adopted because learners are mostly now spending their time on phones than on computers. They're even more lazy to use their computers than their phones. So I think if we also try to spread that sort of awareness, I always tell them, like, you can learn how to code. There are so many apps that you can get from Play Store or whatever phone you are using, and just use them on your phone, basically. So I think it's just awareness. So we should try to let them know about such technologies, and then we should try to integrate them as well with them in a that policy now. As we talk about policy of no, the learner shouldn't bring their phones and everything, right? But if it's a computer science class, they should have their phones. So we will try to look at some of those aspects of policing and bring all that technology into the way it's supposed to be in the computer classroom. If they are going to math, no, they should do math. But yeah, we are aware of that.
Great talk. Well done.
Thank you.
My question is also around infrastructure, because that's a really, really hard problem to solve. I know that Namibia is working on upping their tech education game and tech game in general. Do you know about any of the stuff that's happening there around creating the infrastructure that's needed for schools? So getting internet out there, getting computers out there, the equipment, because it's freaking a hard, expensive problem to solve.
Yeah. The issue with infrastructure, as I said in the beginning, that one now requires, additional support. Of course, it requires also political will and private and public sector coming together. But there are many options that I don't know how many people in the room know about Raspberry Pis. Yeah, so some of the schools have been able to actually look at such technologies to bring them in the classroom. So so that the issue of infrastructure is not an issue, really. Like, if you have to buy Raspberry Pis, you don't have to spend a lot of other expensive computers. So the only thing now with even Raspberry Pis is awareness, because they are not aware of them. So even if you go now to senior management and have to tell them, no, you can use this type of technology, they'll be like, what is that, basically? So it's awareness that is not there. Political wise, these people are meeting now with Elon. They want Starlink to come through. So the infrastructure we think is going to be good in the future, looking at how things are working now politically. We just now have to worry about, the technology itself, what we can, integrate into with the infrastructure we are going to receive. So internet is not going to be a problem at all. It's the technology that we are choosing that is going to be a problem.
Cool. I'll just drop in from here. Just to add into the question around code editors on the phone, I wanted to just help bridge a knowledge thing there. The one thing is, if internet is not a problem, all the browser-based stuff that you just showed, like that all exists, right? So if you're going to use Scratch to get going, and then the programming experience toolkit from Microsoft, which has Python in it, you can do all of that on the web, and you get your tutorial alongside it. So it's about thinking about your educational outcomes, and then if you're offline, there's stuff like Solo Learn, and there's tons of games, because actually it can be really fun and engaging at the same time as we're programming. But as programmers, we kind of think, ooh, must throw an IDE at children. And that's worked for us, but there are much lower floors to get in.
Thank you so much for your talk. Really resonated with what you're doing at the CHBC, also doing training to that level. Regarding the adoption challenges, just wanted to add a few notes there. Maybe you can comment on that. One reason why companies provide licenses is they provide user support. So if there's problems, you can contact Microsoft and they'll give you support. Obviously, we have big communities you can ask for in open source, but that is a key component that teachers and whatnot might struggle with, because it can't contact somebody that actually paid for that can give them direct support. So that's one, another adoption challenge I think you would have to, take into consideration. The other thing is, you mentioned policy and government. So to some degree, state officials are also encouraged, in inverted commas, by big companies to use their products. So they would want, schools to use Microsoft products because they are encouraged to use it. So that awareness is important, but there's also the political game that you have to play, and that's part of it. My last comment is you mentioned Moodle. So we also used to use Moodle to some degree, but again, our business model, for that aspect, was teaching. We wanted to teach learners, but our software engineer that supported Moodle left. Now, who's going to run Moodle, make the updates? When it crashes, what happens? Which happened to us. Now we move to Canvas, which is also for free. So I'm just giving you another, aspect. Maybe you didn't mention, but it's important to take this into consideration.
Yeah, all noted. Okay, you can go.
Applause for the work you do and the great presentation. Just two questions. What is the impact of big tech, Microsoft and other big companies on this landscape? How do they influence and compete with open source? How do you see that? And second question is, what do you think the next generation are going to need, given that the landscape changes? Where, when we started it was binary and now it's moved on. Would you want a Python interpreter or ChatGPT terminal?
That's a good question. I think Microsoft has played a quite significant role in marketing their product to be in schools, because they are the first people, especially, to be adopted. But then, as I said in the beginning, if we are to build an inclusive and quality education, we don't not only have to look at one aspect of technology. I can remember first when I started learning Linux, I was like, oh, you can install packages in a terminal, and then you can even see how they are actually going. So like when we introduce learners to some type of technology, and we are not actually limiting their skill set. So I think especially people now have options to choose. Imagine somebody actually getting interest to do cyber just by working in the terminal for the first time. But if they were not having exposure to now, use some other alternatives, then they would just be installing packages from, so I think we need to be inclusive. It's not like we are actually, getting rid of Microsoft? No, but we have to look at other type of technology. Of course, the landscape is changing, but then while it's changing, we can also try to be inclusive and build our skill set from different type of technologies that we can integrate once within the classroom or in our educational settings.
Hi. Thank you for your talk. I just wanted to know, how well is this product suited for learners from, say, grade 4 to grade 7 on teaching them how to learn how to code and, build the skills in software?
Can you just repeat that?
So suitability for learners from grade 4 to 7, so ages probably about 10 to 14, 10 to 13, thereabouts.
There are quite a lot of projects. I just presented Scratch, right? It's graphical programming. You don't have to write code. So that one is highly recommended for learners who not demographics, because they can build their programming skill set from just, moving out blocks and putting them together. And then when they feel comfortable enough to write their first line of code, then they can use an interpreter and they can now write code. But there are technologies that they can use like Scratch, which is open source as well, to learn coding.
Okay, I see a few more questions.
Hi there. Thank you very much for the talk. Just two sort of informational points I think that might be interesting. I'm a parent, so I suppose there's probably a rite of passage with developers where you become a parent and then you try and fix your school's coding environment.
Every parent is a teacher.
Anyway, the two were, firstly, the WCED has mandated that from next year, from grade 1 onwards, coding and robotics is part of the core curriculum for anyone who's got kids here. But secondly, in my little journey, which started with trying to get up IDEs and that sort of thing, what I found the single biggest gain was making sure that the kids have a stable OAuth identity. It's something we don't really think about, but if you've got a digital identity, then you can log into code.org or anything. And as those things improve, the kids will pick them up. And if a new resource comes up, they can just access it. So that's a really big fundamental. And then the kids can work at home as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Other questions? Okay, I think the gentleman on that side, and then I'll get you. Sorry, I'm one person.
Awesome. Hi, Kanhalelo. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really cool. I find it interesting because I think about 3 years ago, post-COVID, I had a similar heart-burning question around how we can introduce coding to primary school kids. Never got to action anything, to be honest. And then I think one of the ideas we had in terms of raising awareness and just reaching the schools was using Raspberry Pi, which I think you just mentioned. But the problem was that we wanted to reach so many schools and we couldn't buy 1 million Raspberry Pis and share with the schools. And the idea we had was to make use of a mobile school using buses where we can, reach schools through that. Do you think that's one way that we can build awareness around programming to primary schools and stuff?
Yeah. You said you wanted to use Raspberry Pis, right? No. There is a lot of options that you can use for primary school, educational settings. Because now, in our country, the issue is not even about they should program. Is that is just not part of their curriculum at all. So it's policy. That issue is normally with policy. So I think we have to start with policy first, in our case, to address that issue of people should not be limited to some skills because of their age. And then what are they going to school for? If you are saying that, a primary school learner shouldn't be learning how to code at that stage. So that should be included. We need some policy reforms here. But you can try to build a community, right? just same way we initiate our PyCon communities. You can, you can start off with a nice small Instagram page which only post content related, to primary school kids, and they can follow your page and they can start learning from, from Facebook, and they can, then you build a community, then you can bring the community together within your, channel of communicating through online. You can put it on TikTok because they are on TikTok now. And then you can just have a TikTok channel for programming that, spreads content and awareness about, what you want to do or what you want them to learn as, programmers.
Hi, the mic's over here. Thank you for the talk. If you're looking for me, I'm right in front of you. Sorry. Commendable work. I certainly couldn't do what you do. So thank you for doing that. 2 points. One, slightly jokingly, but a second one, maybe more seriously. One, interesting choice of acronym for your high school programming competition. I feel like one day when you do have a high performance computing center, they might come knocking. And then two, I'm quite new to PyCon as an organization, as a conference. I gather it's open source. Something we've tried to adopt in an open source collaboration of ours is something called office hours for developers who kind of are at the core of the collaboration. I don't know if this is a thing that you do already, but teachers, learners, whatever it might be, who have burning questions with some kind of insight can come to a group of people between sort of 6 and 7 p.m. every second Wednesday and say, hi, I've got this question. Does anyone have any insight? So is that something you considered? If not, that's cool. Just a suggestion.
Yeah. I think we are also putting that one into consideration. Thank you for the suggestion.
Hi, Robson. Thank you very much. It's, I think, a fairly difficult thing when you're dealing with kids and software. Everyone having a GitHub account, we take email accounts for granted. I think one of the big things we also need to tackle is OAuth and security around kids. Like my kid doesn't have an email address, he won't get one for quite some time. And there's a bit of admin around that. So I think that's also something that wasn't quite mentioned. That really does enable you to engage with the open source community and coding. So maybe an initiative around providing like classroom mailboxes where teachers can regulate access to different services, things like that. And the second thing around policy is, and I think this has also got to do with how quickly things are changing, is there any movement or will towards getting recognition of prior learning towards certifications in Namibia? It's something that South Africa's been trying to push, has made some progress in. If you do get an AWS, cloud native certificate, or you get a Python certification done, Microsoft Learn is free, some of the exams aren't, but if you get those certifications, using that towards passing grades, because we know how things change as quickly as they do, you can't quite get that into the curriculum and maintain it fast enough. It moves too slowly. So is that something that you think might be a solution towards, a faster responding education department, and that's also more flexible to learners?
Thank you. I think maybe there is, an oversight with that, but I feel like, if we also consider that, as a solution to policy, then I think we didn't try it in Namibia, but it's a recommendation, something that I'm actually glad to hear from you. So we are also actually going to try to do that when we try to address the policing issues.
Hi, Robson. So,
Hi.
like many others, just a word of encouragement. The stuff you're doing amazing work. I think even the conversations we had last night, just to just keep doing it. It's really amazing. Then I'm gonna try and be sneaky and squeeze 2 questions in. So first one is about open source in general, and the second one is about the role of open source in teaching. So basically, I think about open source in general. Like, in my experience, there's been a bit of changes over the last couple of years. There's been a bit of a muddying, so Microsoft was brought up, and paradoxically, Microsoft is one of the biggest contributors to open source at this point. So there's a bit of a fuzziness in terms of that dichotomy of kind of open source versus the big corporate giant. And I also think there's been a bit of like experimentation in terms of licensing and so forth. And I think specifically now with everything that's happening with WordPress as well, that also raises a lot of questions. So I think my first question would be, do you see kind of this experimentation and kind of blurring of boundaries as a good thing or a bad thing? In terms of maybe increasing accessibility, or maybe it opens up space for more deceptive actors to kind of be ambiguous and so forth. The second question is around, so you mentioned GIMP, so the visual editing tool. So I've been involved in academia for a very long time. And like this is always a question that comes up. So maybe a bit more on the high school side, tertiary side, that when someone's obviously going to apply for work, if they want to make a career, then they're probably going to be using the proprietary tools. Then they're going to probably have to use Figma or whatever. So is there a case to be made that it might be more beneficial to train them in some of these proprietary tools with the educational license in favor of, like, instead going for an open source tool that's not actually widely used in the industry? Is that a tension that you experience? And if so, kind of like, what are your thoughts around that? Yeah.
Thank you. Good question. I want to start with your last question. I think, as we talk about inclusivity, okay, you learn, Figma because you're going to use it on the job. But what if we don't have money for Figma at that moment? So you just can't learn, at all. No, then you just have to go for an option that is available, and then what we are trying to do is not to disregard proprietary software, is to try to include it within already existing one. So you can have Figma, and just like you can have, Linux and Windows in your virtual machine. So you can have more options. You learn Windows and you learn Linux at the same time. So the changing landscape is I think it's not going to affect the way people have to, select which specific software they have to go for. I think the dynamics now, when they get to actually know and contribute, then they can actually, keep software which is open source. They can be now new contributors to open source software. They can now help with documentation. They can, and it's gonna go on, and they can, at least we are not letting open source software die, like what we are looking at, those ones that are actually dying now, because there are no contributors and there is no awareness about it. But then if we start, letting the kids aware about this, they can be new contributors to open source software.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, just due to time, thank you for your contributions. And I'm going to thank our keynote speaker again, Mr. Robson Kanhalelo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.